The moment you say no to lust, the ground beneath your soul shifts, not metaphorically, but spiritually. You've just declared war on a realm most people pretend doesn't exist. Lust isn't just a craving. It's a spirit, one that's ancient, calculating, and territorial. It knows your history. It knows your father's weaknesses, your mother's secret wounds. It has walked through your bloodline for generations, feeding silently on shame. And when you, the chosen one, dare to resist, you don't just break a habit, you rupture a contract. You shatter a throne it thought it owned inside you. That no isn't small. It's a nuclear blast. In the unseen, demons panic, angels rise. The spirit realm responds. But few ever talk about what really happens in that moment, the shaking, the silence, the retaliation. Because when you refuse to bow to lust, you don't just walk away from sin, you step into destiny. Stay. What you're about to hear isn't a sermon, it's a war briefing. By the end of this, you'll know exactly why hell fears your purity and why heaven has been waiting for your resistance. When you say no to lust, you're not just avoiding temptation. You're pulling a spiritual sword from its sheath and stabbing it into the heart of darkness. That simple act of resistance isn't small in heaven's eyes. It's massive. It's spiritual warfare at its rawest level. Because lust is not just a feeling. It's a weapon from hell forged to hijack your mind, dull your spirit, and separate you from your divine authority. Every time you say yes to lust, the enemy tightens the leash. Not just on your actions, but on your identity. Your soul starts to forget who you are. But the moment you say no, even when everything in you wants to give in, the realm of darkness trembles. Because that no is spiritual proof that the addiction is losing its grip. You've punched a hole in a demonic pattern that may have held your bloodline captive for decades. Lust is a spirit that survives on silence, secrecy, and shame. It whispers lies into your identity. You'll never be free. Everyone struggles with this. You're too far gone. But when you speak no with conviction, you break the silence. You call the demon out. You expose it to light, and demons hate the light. In that instant, the spirit realm responds. Demons shriek because they have been evicted from their hiding place. You may feel inner resistance, confusion, or even exhaustion, not because you're weak, but because there's warfare happening around you. You didn't just say no to a screen, a fantasy, or a moment of pleasure. You said no to a spirit that thought it owned real estate inside your soul. What's more powerful? Lust pulling you into momentary escape or the strength it takes to reject it and reclaim your mind? Every act of resistance is a reclaiming. You take back your thoughts. You take back your will. You take back your calling. That single no may be the most prophetic thing you've spoken in years. God sees it. Angels are drawn to it, and the enemy fears it. Because when you say no to lust, you realign yourself with heaven's flow. You begin to hear again, feel again, and discern again. Purity restores sensitivity. It sharpens your spiritual vision. And when that happens, your authority begins to rise. That's why the spirit realm shakes. Because your no isn't just a rejection of sin. It's the resurrection of your divine identity. The real war isn't just about pleasure. It's about purpose. The enemy doesn't just want your body. He wants your influence, your future, and your seed. When you resist lust, you're not just resisting sin. You're resisting sabotage. You're stepping out of slavery and into spiritual dominion. So don't be surprised when the atmosphere changes. When hell screams, when warfare comes, that's not defeat. That's confirmation. You just made hell nervous, and heaven just took note. Lust is not random. It's strategic. It doesn't knock on your door simply because you're weak. It arrives because it is rights, ancestral rights. Ancient permissions passed down through bloodlines. Unspoken, unchallenged, and spiritually binding. Many people think they struggle with lust because they lack willpower. But willpower doesn't explain why certain patterns keep repeating in your family: adultery, addiction, secret pornography habits, premature pregnancies, broken marriages, and cycles of shame. These are not coincidences. They are assignments. Lust has studied your bloodline. It knows your family history better than you do. Spirits of lust aren't just interested in you. They're territorial. They stake claims over generations, entering through open doors like sexual trauma, abuse, infidelity, occult practices, and even unrepented sins from ancestors long buried. What began with one man's compromise becomes a chain that wraps around sons, grandsons, and great-grandsons. What was once one woman's pain becomes a spiritual veil over daughters and granddaughters. And here's the terrifying truth. If you don't confront it, you become the next willing host. But when you say no, something radical happens. You don't just resist sin. You begin a spiritual revolt. You're tearing down strongholds that were built decades, even centuries, ago. Lust isn't shocked by your temptation. It's threatened by your rebellion. Because when you resist, you threaten its lineage. Demons don't just want your fall. They want your children. They want the generational gate to stay wide open. Every time you entertain the lustful thought, click on that image, or justify that secret habit, you're reinforcing an invisible agreement made long before you were born. But the moment you resist, the contract begins to tear. Your purity isn't just personal. It's prophetic. You're not just protecting yourself. You're declaring war on a spiritual inheritance. You're choosing to become the curse breaker, the one heaven anoints and hell fears, the one who says, "It ends with me." That's why resistance is so violent in the spirit. You'll feel tired, tormented, and tempted beyond reason, because it's not just about you. You're fighting the battles your ancestors ran from. You're cleaning bloodlines with your no. But remember this, what enters through one person can also enter through one. Your obedience becomes a divine interruption. Your resistance becomes a spiritual alarm. Angels are released. Generational altars begin to crack, and the blood of Jesus, once abstract, begins to move like fire through your family tree. So don't underestimate that simple act of saying no. It is heaven's hammer, hell's headache, and the first act in a new generational legacy. You are not weak, you are chosen. You are not just resisting lust, you are rewriting history. Lust is not just a physical urge. It is a spirit, subtle, seductive, and spiritual in nature. It doesn't just target your body, it targets your soul. It doesn't want a moment of pleasure. It wants a lifetime of disconnection from God. Lust is the master of counterfeit intimacy, and its goal is simple, to make you feel temporarily full, while leaving you eternally empty. Real intimacy is rooted in connection, emotional, spiritual, and divine. It's where vulnerability meets trust, where love is sacrificial and covenantal. But lust takes this holy design and perverts it. It offers the illusion of connection. But behind the curtain is manipulation, bondage, and spiritual numbness. It makes you feel wanted, but only as long as you're consuming or being consumed. The moment is over. You're not satisfied. You're more hollow than before. Lust doesn't knock loudly. It whispers in the quiet. It doesn't show up as evil. It disguises itself as comfort, curiosity, or natural desire. It's not always aggressive. Sometimes it feels gentle, even romantic. That's the danger, because what looks like love isn't. What feels like closeness is actually separation from God, from others, and from your true self. The spirit doesn't just want your eyes. It wants your attention, your imagination, your longing. It hijacks the very part of you that desires union and turns it into a weapon against your own soul. It promises intimacy without responsibility, connection without covenant, and pleasure without purpose. But real love, God's love, never comes that way. It doesn't rush. It doesn't exploit. It builds. It heals. It honors. The problem is, once you've fed on lust long enough, you begin to confuse it with love. You start to believe that attraction is affection, that chemistry is compatibility, and that access to your body means someone values your soul. But that's the trick. Lust rewires how you think, what you feel, and how you view relationships. And once it's embedded in your system, it doesn't just affect you in private. It bleeds into how you treat people, how you worship, and how you lead. Lust isn't satisfied with the act. It wants to corrupt your blueprint. If it can take your God-given desire for closeness and twist it, It knows you'll run the counterfeits every time you feel lonely, broken, or unseen. That's the real trap, not the sin itself, but what the sin replaces: real connection with the Father. And that's why saying no to lust is more than moral discipline. It's spiritual warfare. You are not rejecting pleasure. You are rejecting the parasite attached to it. You are saying, I will not trade eternal wholeness for temporary relief. You were created for divine intimacy, a sacred connection with God that fulfills what lust can only mimic. Lust gives you a taste. God gives you a feast. When God sees a warrior rise, heaven doesn't respond to comfort. It responds to courage. When you say no to lust, not once, but with conviction, again and again, the spirit realm takes notice. But it's not just hell that trembles, heaven moves. God is not passive. He is not distant. He is watching, not from a throne of indifference, but from the perspective of a father who trained his child for battle. And when that child stands up against lust, one of the most ancient and seductive spirits in the demonic arsenal, heaven doesn't whisper. It roars. Your resistance is not weakness. It is worship. Obedience in private is louder in heaven than applause in public. You may feel isolated, unnoticed, and weary, but in the courts of the Almighty, your no to lust is treated like the sound of a war trumpet. Angels are dispatched, protection is extended, and strength is infused. The enemy tries to convince you that your resistance is insignificant, that no one sees, and that God is silent. But silence is not absence. Silence is strategy. The moment you say no, God begins preparing the next phase of your transformation. The testing is never for punishment. It's for positioning. You're not just being freed from lust. You're being elevated into something greater. You're being made into someone hell dreads. The man or woman who has authority over their flesh and therefore authority in the spirit. Heaven doesn't reward resistance with comfort. It rewards it with power. Think about it. Jesus didn't begin his miracles until after he said no to the temptations in the wilderness, including lust, pride, and power. His authority came not because he escaped the fire, but because he endured it. So when you rise up and declare war on lust, heaven surrounds you like it did Elish's servant with unseen armies. Ready to defend your decision, you are never standing alone. You are standing back by the full weight of the kingdom. And let this sink in. Every time you resist, you're not just breaking something in your own life. You're changing what your bloodline will carry into the future. You are setting a divine precedent. Heaven doesn't just see a struggler. It sees a warrior, a deliverer for generations. God is not waiting for you to be perfect. He is waiting for you to choose him, even when it costs. Every no is a yes to him, and every yes echoes like thunder in the throne room. So if you're in the fight, stay in it. Heaven isn't just aware of your battle. It's invested in your victory. God doesn't crown comfort. He crowns the overcomers. And if you don't quit, you will be one of them. When you say no to lust, it's not just spirits in the unseen that react. People around you will, too. Not because they consciously want to pull you down, but because darkness often uses the familiar to fight what it fears. You need to understand this. When you begin to resist the spirit of lust, you become spiritually disruptive. Your decision to walk in purity irritates the unhealed, unrepentant, and spiritually compromised individuals around you, sometimes even the ones closest to you. Because the spirit realm operates through human vessels. Just as God uses people to advance his kingdom, the enemy uses people to maintain bondage. And when you break out, the spirits still attached to others feel threatened. That's when you'll see strange behavior. People who once encouraged you will suddenly go silent. Some will mock you or tempt you without knowing why. Old flames may reappear. Conversations shift subtly. Invitations to compromise seem to multiply. Even friends you trusted may begin projecting guilt, shame, or doubt toward your decision. It's not always about them. It's about what's operating through them. The enemy's tactic is ancient. If he can't tempt you directly, he'll work through relationships. He will stir up emotion. He will whisper through familiar voices. He will press on your loneliness, hoping to trigger a relapse. Because if he can get you to second-guess your stand, He knows the door can reopen. This is why spiritual discernment is critical. Not everyone around you can walk with you through your purification process. Not everyone around you is submitted to the same standard you're trying to live by. Some are still unknowingly in partnership with the very spirit you are fighting to cast out of your life. But here's what you must remember. Your purity is not just for you. It's a weapon, a mirror, a declaration. When you resist, you expose, and what's hidden in others begins to squirm in discomfort. This is why you'll face rejection, false accusations, and subtle manipulation. You didn't provoke people. You disturbed the demons they never confronted. Expect it, but don't hate them. This isn't a war against flesh and blood. These people are not your enemies. The spirits using them are. Your role is not to fight back with bitterness, but to hold your ground in grace and truth. The hidden war is very real, but you are not alone. Every time you hold the line, heaven backs you. Every time you remain silent when falsely accused, you rise in authority. Every time you choose purity over pressure, the chains weaken, not just for you, but for everyone watching your life. And the more consistent your resistance becomes, the less power these vessels of darkness will have over you, until the only voice you follow is the one who called you out of bondage and into purpose. Lust doesn't just tempt, it strategizes. And one of its final, most dangerous weapons is isolation. Not just physical separation, but emotional, mental, and spiritual loneliness designed to wear you down when temptation fails. When you say no to lust, a shift happens in the spirit. But here's what no one tells you. After the resistance often comes the silence. Suddenly, the rush is gone. The distractions are gone. The people you used to engage with feel distant. The inner noise of pleasure is replaced by an eerie quiet. And that's when the real attack begins. You'll start to feel like something is missing. But it's not God. It's the counterfeit comfort you once relied on. Lust had disguised itself as connection, release, and relief. It gave you dopamine in exchange for your discipline. And now that you've refused its offer, it punishes you with withdrawal. Isolation becomes a spiritual test. You may feel like God is far away. You may question your decision. You may even start to think, at least when I gave in, I didn't feel this alone. That's the trap. That is the voice of the spirit of lust trying to whisper its way back in through your hunger for connection. But hear this clearly. The silence is not abandonment, it's purification. God uses isolation to do what pleasure never could, build spiritual strength. The wilderness isn't a curse, it's a classroom. Jesus was led into the wilderness after his baptism, not to be punished, but to be proven. The same applies to you. After the breaking of lust's grip, you are being reconditioned for something far greater. You're not being left behind, you're being hidden. Hidden so your roots grow deep. Hidden so your spirit strengthens in solitude. Hidden because you are no longer led by feelings but by faith. The loneliness you feel is the space where God wants to meet you, not through goosebumps or emotional highs but through spiritual intimacy. This is why many fall back, because the silence convinces them the war is over. But in reality, the silence means you've already won round one and the enemy has switched tactics. Lust wants you back, but it knows it can't tempt you the same way anymore. So it waits. It isolates. It makes you miss the chains you just broke. But don't go back. If you endure this season of silence, of sacred loneliness, you won't come out the same. You'll be rooted. You'll be dangerous to hell. You'll be spiritually awakened in a way lust could never mimic. The weapon of isolation only works on those who fear solitude. But those who learn to thrive in it become unshakable. Your isolation is not the end. It's the incubation of a warrior. And the enemy knows once you master it, you'll never bow again. The world has taught you that purity is simply about abstinence, about saying no to lust, to pleasure, to desire. But in the spirit realm, purity is far more than moral behavior. It is alignment with divine authority. It is spiritual clarity. It is the restoration of original power that was stolen through compromise. Lust doesn't just stain you, it blinds you. Every time you surrender to it, a little more of your spiritual sight is dimmed. You stop hearing God clearly. You stop sensing direction. You lose confidence, not because you're broken, but because the enemy has fogged your perception. That fog is strategic because what you can't see, you can't claim. But the moment you choose purity, real purity, not perfection, that fog begins to lift. And with every layer that clears, your gifts return. Your discernment sharpens. You begin to hear the whisper of heaven again. The dreams you thought had died start breathing. That's not your imagination. That's your anointing reactivating. Purity unlocks clarity. Clarity leads to conviction, and conviction awakens calling. The devil never fought you just to make you feel guilty. Guilt was a tool. Shame was bait. His real goal was to keep you disconnected from your assignment. Why? Because a person who is pure in heart becomes dangerous. Not because they're clean, but because they're clear. And clarity is lethal in spiritual warfare. The enemy can't manipulate someone who sees through his tactics. When you say no to lust, heaven doesn't just applaud. Heaven begins to move through you. New authority flows from your life. You speak, and things shift. You pray, and strongholds tremble. You walk into a room, and atmospheres respond. Why? Because your vessel is no longer leaking power. It's full, guarded, and holy. This is why purity is such a threat, not because you're trying to be good, but because you're becoming powerful, not in ego, but in essence. When you cleanse your temple, God takes resonance. When you stop giving your body to what drains you, your spirit begins to overflow. This is why so many spiritual leaders fell when they compromised. Not because they were weak, but because they lost purity, and with it, clarity. And once clarity fades, deception moves in. Your purity isn't for your image, it's for your impact. It's the soil where your true power is planted and grows. If you've been wondering why your prayers feel different, why your discernment is returning, why old battles no longer grip you the same, it's because purity is rewiring you for power. You're not just surviving lust, you're outgrowing it. You're stepping into a level of spiritual potency that hell hoped you'd never discover. And now that you have, the real journey begins. Lust doesn't begin as a monster. It begins as comfort, a whisper in moments of loneliness, a relief valve when the world feels too heavy. It tells you it's harmless, just a feeling, just a release. But over time, it becomes a leash, one made of silence, secrecy, and shame. And before you realize it, you're not indulging, you're obeying. You're not enjoying it, you're enslaved to it. That's the brutal truth most won't say aloud. Lust turns powerful men into passive spectators. It rewires your soul, trades your war for a whimper, and steals your authority while letting you believe you're still in control. But here's where everything shifts. The day you finally say no, not in fear or guilt, but in revelation, is the day your reversal begins. Not a small turn, not a gentle pivot, but a violent, holy uprising within your spirit. Because you weren't born for addiction. You weren't created to serve pleasure. You were made for dominion. And when you finally reject lust's chains, something awakens inside you that lust was designed to suppress: purpose, power, and priesthood. You go from consumer to creator, from passive pleasure seeker to lion-hearted leader. Suddenly, your mind is clear. Your vision returns. Decisions aren't fogged by cravings, they're led by conviction. Your no becomes the foundation of a new spiritual architecture. Where lust once screamed, now there's peace. Where shame once lived, now there's authority. You no longer walk into rooms wondering who's watching you. You walk in carrying the weight of heaven. You speak, and hell remembers your voice. This is the reversal. Lust turned you into a slave, but purpose turns you into a lion. And the moment you reclaim your purity, you reclaim your roar. People will notice, not because you're louder, but because you're heavier, not in flesh, but in spirit. You carry something the world can't name, but demons recognize it instantly. It's holiness, and nothing terrifies hell like a man or woman who walks in it boldly. So if you've fallen, rise. If you've been silent, speak. If you've been bound, break the leash. The enemy never feared your pleasure. He feared the day you'd see through it and remember who you really are. You are not a slave. You are not addicted. You are not broken. You are a lion. And lust was only the cage. The real enemy was after your voice, your calling, and your crown. And now you see it. You see how spiritual forces tried to seduce you in the silence, how they disguise bondage as freedom, self-pleasure as self-love, and isolation as independence. You see how they tricked generations before you, but they couldn't keep you because you said no. And maybe your voice trembled when you said it. Maybe you fell and had to get back up. Maybe you're still battling in the quiet of your nights. But heaven saw it, hell felt it, and the moment you chose to fight, the entire spirit realm took notice. You're not weak for struggling. You're dangerous because you keep rising. You didn't lose something when you turned away from lust. You recovered everything: your vision, your clarity, your strength, and most of all, your purpose. And now you walk differently, not with shame, but with spiritual weight, not with pride, but with power. Because you're no longer a slave who begs for comfort. You're a lion who remembers who he is. So let the demons rage. Let the temptations come. Let the enemy throw his old tricks your way. You're not the same anymore. You crossed a line in the spirit, and there's no going back. You've been marked, not by lust, but by fire, holy fire. So guard your purity like a warrior guards a throne. Walk boldly, speak freely, live with intentional purity, not out of fear, but because you know what it costs to be bound and what it feels like to finally be free. The next time lust knocks, remember it's not offering you pleasure. It's begging for permission to take your crown. And now you know better. Now you see clearly. Now you fight differently. You said no, and the spirit realm will never forget it. This is the rise of the lion, and the sound of your roar is just beginning.